Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
Hello everyone and welcome back to a new episode of the Life and Happiness Podcast run by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Steven Solorzano, and let's get back into it. What's the most interesting thing that's happened so far this week? Well, I actually saw the Zack Snyder cut of the Justice League movie. It's not as bad as I thought it would be, and from the other reviews I've been reading as well to see what other people thought, it's better than people thought as a whole. What do you guys think? Have you taken a look at it? Did Zack Snyder do a good job? Zack Snyder. Why do I keep calling him Zack Snyder? Yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. I wonder if Star Wars can make a similar redemption. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think they can. But we'll have to see. Is there anything else that popped out this week? Other than, well, there are some other more troubling things in the news, but nothing lighthearted and fun came out that was worth mentioning. I heard that the Grammys had new lows of record views, and that's been happening across every award ceremony. Do you guys watch your award ceremonies, like for the Oscars or the Tonys, Golden Globes? I personally have never been interested in that kind of glamorous gossip type stuff. The way one of my mentors put it, it's like at the most basic level you can be talking about people. At the next step up, you talk about places and events. And the deepest conversations happen the level of ideas. And, well, that's the theme of the podcast, you know? You talk about these ideas, break them down, using real-life events to try to understand them a little bit more, you know? So, what are we going to be doing today? Today's theme is going to be focusing on what blinds us to the kind of bigger picture. Specifically, like the missing tile syndrome, and also, well, comparing ourselves to others. So, question of the day. Do you guys have someone or something where it's like, because it makes you focus on the things which you lack, it makes it harder to see the things which you actually do have, you know? I need a good example to illustrate this more. So let's say, okay, well, here's one for me when I was younger, growing up. So, I've mentioned before how my dad, what he tried to raise me was try to be my biggest bully, so then I could handle anyone else, because no one would be tougher than he was. So, what he would do is insult me in many different ways. And one of the ones that really stuck was whenever he'd make fun of my smile or anything like that. So, one of the habits that I have, and it's kind of just instinctual now. It's like when I smile or laugh, I kind of instinctively want to raise my hand up and kind of cover it. Because it's kind of, I guess, despite the other parts of my appearance that I have, my mind wants to focus on that little part which it thinks it's lacking. You know, the missing tile part of it. And it provokes a reaction from me. And I don't feel bad about it anymore. It's just, well, because of so many years of that, it's just an inbuilt habit. But that's kind of one example of what this kind of stuff is like. And for the final segment today, we're going to go over 7 different things which typically blind people into unappreciation of the rest around them. 7 missing tiles. That's the meat of final segment of the day. So let's get back into it. A big theme of the podcast so far has been this idea of gratitude, of being able to focus on what's around you. But the thing is, with humans, we pay attention to the negative way more than the positive. And there's an important reason for that. It's partly biological. It's to conserve energy. Our bodies want to orient things into either danger or non-danger, that kind of thing. And the things which are non-dangerous, it becomes part of, habit, part of routine. There's no worry about what can happen with it. It's more like we become so accustomed to its use and to its presence that it's not in something which naturally brings to the forefront of the mind. Whereas the things which breed uncertainty, the things which can hurt us, the things we don't know everything about, that's where the mind puts its most focus on, because that could be a potential threat. That's what could be hurting us. That's where something could come from behind and stab us in the back. Those, if you want to go back in the ancient days, that would have been the snake hiding in the tree, which our primate ancestors would have seen as danger, run, that kind of thing. Think about like how breathy you would get when you're in a fight or flight situation. How energized that kind of is. That's provoking that reaction. Your brain going into high gear because you have to deal with the unknown right then and there. And for what that means in our social context, because that's the purely biological, looking at it as, well, what do animals see? And now it changes. It changes a bit for what humans are, even though it's the same base instincts. Because it's not just, danger, that's going to kill me. It's more of a more broad... Like, think about it the way we are around strangers. It's the type of things that we're comfortable telling to a stranger or are dependent upon their demeanor, how they act. We're constantly paying attention to one another. And the thought is, can I trust this person? And also, this is a big reason why introverts find extroversion very exhausting, is because their natural inclination to have to be on that kind of level, interacting with people, spending all that energy looking for all those signs, trying to figure out what the right thing to say is very exhausting to those people. Whereas to extroverts, it's not as exhausting. So now let's bring that into the missing tile syndrome specifically. So we know that our brains want to make the things that we understand, the things that are beneficial to us, and the things which, at the very least, pose no danger. Those go into our habit, into that kind of passive understanding of the brain, the unconscious almost, versus the things which are of a pressing danger. They go into, that's where our attention focuses on, because, that's the threat, the thing we have to handle. So, now let's look at it, let's look at it from, I think the best way I can describe this is from a relationship type perspective. So, let's say you're with this person for so long, right? And, well, I'm going to go from my own perspective as a guy. Well, let's say she's beautiful. She cooks for you. She takes care of you. She's very sweet. She's extremely supportive. But she has extremely bad breath. That's the one problem, That may be a real... Okay, that may actually be serious. Okay, let me say, how about instead of that bad breath, let's say the one flaw is that she's like 2 minutes late every time you want to go get something. So, after a while, you get so used to the other stuff and how she is, and your mind will start to focus on the problems that are there. Because you know what? There are always going to be problems, no matter what type of situation it is. And so the problem is you're noticing, oh, it's she's always 2 minutes late. Oh my God. But would that be enough to abandon that kind of thing? Like, is that small little issue enough to derail the other sense of happiness that you would be having? Because if you're not focusing on if you broaden your vision, you would be able to see everything else that she is doing for you, all the benefits, all the lovely memories you guys are forging together. But because your mind wants to focus on those small glaring issues, then, well, it tends to sour your view on the whole relationship kind of thing. So there are a few things you can do with this. It's either, one, you accept it and just move on. As you just, get used to that kind of thing, which, sometimes you might have to. And, number 2 is you actually try to address the situation. You see if you can fix it, if it is possible. And I guess, let's see. I do have exactly where I was reading it from. And then number 3 would be you try to fill that part that's occupying your mind with something else, something, you try to put something in that space so your mind is not constantly focusing on it. And that's just more like, this is more of a minuscule version of this, but it can go into a broader context. And I'm gonna go share the story about Dennis Prager for one sec, because this gives a better illustration of this in a more serious type of context. In his second marriage, he really wanted another kid. And he was illustrating that it was so focused on his mind that it was distracting him from everything else between his relationship. That everything was going great. He had a lovely wife, they had 2 lovely children, and, well, he just couldn't help but focusing that part of him wanted that third. And luckily, he was able to fill that void. They were able to get the third. They were able to address the situation. And he's very happy with his child. But then he goes and explores the other possible situations. What would he do if it was unfeasible to have a third one? And he said the best way he could have done it is try his best to forget about the missing tile, which in this case would be wanting to have a third child, and focus more on spending time with his own kids and his own wife, and focus more on them. And the other issue, the other part of it, let's see if I can pull it up exactly. So the other one he mentioned is maybe they could have adopted. It would have been the exact same, but, something to fill the void, So it's either you try your best to forget about the issue, or you try to fill the void, you try to actually solve the issue and try to achieve what you want, or you try to fill that space with something else. Those are the best ways to address that missing tile type thing. And it broadens out to many different issues. Let's say, for example, you have good friends, you have a good family, but you're not making the amount of money that you want to make. You're lacking in the career type aspect of it. And then you have to think, okay, what do I have to do to get there? What are the steps that I have to take myself where that focus really wants me to be? And then you can go and try to address it. Or you can try to fill that void with something else. Well, if I can't succeed financially in the career world, maybe there's something else which I can use as a source of my own excellence. And a lot of people do that with hobbies. Actually, if you're interested in wiffle ball, that's kind of a really funny thing to see with other people, them playing wiffle ball. But But another one like this is, what's it called? Oh, and then the last bit would be, well, try to forget about it. Do your best to put it outside of your mind and focus on the things which you do have there instead. So that would be to focus on his own family and, to focus with his friends. But that's kind of the three main ways I can describe these kind of things. That could be something really small, what you find pointed. It brings your mind to it and detracts from your appreciation of the other things around you. It could also be something larger, just something that you feel like you're missing and you can't help but focus on it. And those are the three ways you can go about it. As like I said, you forget about it, or you try to fill the void, or you try to replace it with a different tile that may not exactly fit, but it's as close as you're gonna get. So in the next segment, we're gonna go more into this idea. But see, this specific part was more focused on yourself, on the individual. Now we're gonna broaden it to comparing yourself to others and why that heightens these issues. And instead, you should focus solely on comparing yourself to you of the day prior. And we'll get all into that into the next segment. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys soon.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hello and welcome back, everyone, to the Life and Happiness podcast run by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Steven Solorzano, and let's get back into this one, guys. So, the theme of this episode is going to be the missing tile. The things which we focus on and make us unappreciative of everything else which goes around in our own lives. And first segment, we're still focusing specifically on that and more on the individual aspect of it. But then it also can extend beyond the individual into comparing yourself directly to others and belittling yourself compared to those others. And that is one big negative consequence of it if you're falling victim to the missing tile syndrome. And don't forget, the last segment of the day is the 7 biggest missing tiles, the 7 strongest missing tiles, which, end up leading to the same effects. The ones which make us unappreciative, forget to be grateful, all those kinds of stuff. So, what do I mean by when these missing tiles extend beyond ourselves? So, think about it. When you focus on the things which you don't have, you also notice those that do have them. So let's say you're always focusing on, the wealth aspect of it. How little I don't have. And then you're going to start paying attention to all the people that do have. And if you set on your mind that it's just something you can't take possession of, that you remove your ability to actually fill in that hole or replace it, or maybe even forget about it, then you're going to start becoming angry at the people that do have it. Because that means you'll start to envy them. That's the first thing. And then with the victimization that comes as a part of it, you'll start to despise them. So envy turns into anger, and then it leads into very dark roads after that fact. George Orwell, as you may know, wrote 1984 in another book, and the name escapes me at the moment. But if I do remember, I will bring it up later in the podcast. It was an exploration of specifically the socialist types, because he wasn't sure if socialism was motivated by compassion for the poor or by a hatred for the rich. And that was the idea he was exploring there. And the way the story went is he went and got to know this town, which they were a town of coal miners, and they had very rough lives, very rough jobs. Basically, the men would have to hike 2 hours, a 2-hour hike through caves, through mine shafts to get to their job, just to get there, and then work 10-hour shifts, mining the coal and breathing in all that carbon dioxide and all the soot and all the other stuff which you would find in those kinds of environments. And then you'd have to hike 2 hours back to get home. So that would be, you're like a 14-hour day, and you only get paid for the 10 hours that you're there, and the wages weren't great. And so by the time that you were 20, you look like you're 45, and you have black lung by the time you're 30, and people who die by the time you're 35. It's brutally short lives, and the women would be suffering too, slogging away up on top. And George Orwell wrote about specifically how he made eye contact with one of these women on the train, and she was essentially waiting for water to come out from the well, and the well was frozen up at the time, and he could see in her eyes how much she realized the horrible situation that they were in. It's not that people are unaware or they're just blindly going down. No, every single one of us is aware of the situation that we're in and how good or how bad it is. And they knew how rough the life they had. So his point in regarding to that was, of course, anyone who could understand just a sliver of that kind of hardship should have sympathy for the poor, should feel that kind of compassion that, you know what, some people have it really tough out there. But with all the socialist types that he met, because he was a socialist himself early on, what he found was that in their writings and in the things that they would do, that their motivations weren't centered around doing something for those poor. It was around destroying the people above them. Because the way these people were focused is, so their missing tile specifically was materiality, wealth, clothing, whatever you can describe it, just having and not having. That was what their specific worldview was focused on. And what they saw was, I want more. And they weren't looking at the things that they had. They weren't looking at the ease of things they had. They were looking at the food. They were looking at the relationships. They were looking at these elites have way more than I do, and that's not fair. I should have it. We all should have it. So their motivations were focused on using the working class solely as a cudgel to break the rich down to their level, to destroy them. So I'll trace it back. It was, so they start with envy because, it starts with feeling empty because you're missing something, right? And for them specifically, it's wealth that they felt like they were missing, or success, or power. Any one of those would work. So then they looked at the people that did have it with envy, and then it was anger, and then finally, here's a story that you may not know. So, early on in the days of what would become the Soviet Union, there were, after the serfdom had really fallen off and people could actually own land, there were people called the kulaks, which were the peasants who had succeeded enough at farming that they had enough maybe to hire an extra hand or two. They had a few oxen, and they were producing food for everyone. And they were, achieving some success. Not great success by any means, but something, And what would happen is these social intellectuals would go on and go to the town square and say that the only reason that these people are succeeding, doing better than the rest of the townsfolk, is because they stole it from them. So, these townsfolk got riled up because, look, their missing tile was, well, it's not like everyone, they're basically having a great life, having things that were less painful, having some of that money, some of that wealth. Because, well, if you have ever looked at Siberia is not a pleasant place. It's not an easy place to live. The conditions are harsh. There's not much wealth there to begin with, and especially 100 years ago. So, when someone just had slightly more success than the rest of them, these intellectuals posting their theory that the only reason they're succeeding is because they stole it from the rest of them was enough to harness that anger, harness that envy, which already existed. And then these people went out and murdered the kulaks all over. They killed them all and took their farms. And what that resulted in is they wiped out all the people that actually knew how to produce food. And then what happened was, well, how would I describe it? No one knew how to make food after that, and they all starved. I forget how many. I think it was 2 million specifically in those famines. But the point is, comparing themselves to those other people riled up that anger and caused violence. They were willing to hurt others because they felt they were stolen from. Because they were so focused on what they didn't have and victimized themselves, prevented themselves from being able to fill in that void, that they went on the onslaught and really caused their own destructions in the end, not just the murders of all those people. And that's just one example of it, of what that kind of mindset of focusing on what you don't have can do. And that's on the extreme. But in the broader sense, it makes you unhappy, whatever it is. And this is an idea which I'll probably get into more in a later episode. But because of this story that I'm telling you, I do think it is a moral obligation to act happy. Happiness is a moral obligation. And what I mean by that is, do you think it's the happy people which go and murder all the kulaks? Do you think it's the happy people that go and throw the Jews in the concentration camps, and the gypsies too, and the blacks, and whatever else that wasn't Aryan? Do you think it's happy people that throw others into slavery? Do you think it's happy people that... I don't know what else to say. I covered all the horrible ones. All the really horrible ones. Do you think it's like... If you ever had an unhappy parent growing up, or if you're dating someone unhappy, you know what? It's not just that the unhappy are the ones that are behind are behind these kinds of crimes. It's the unhappy kind of make things worse around them. They make the emotions dour. Like I mentioned this idea slightly before. It's when you have that unhappy coworker, it just brings down morale. I experienced this when I was having a team. If someone wasn't on the same page, if someone didn't want to be on the same goals with everyone else, and they weren't showing up, that would bring down the morale of everyone else to bring everything they have to the table. It just makes things a little bit worse. So I think on top of that, on top of not focusing, on top of that, it benefits you to aim to live a life with meaning and happiness. I think at the very least, we don't have a right to bring our unhappiness on top of other people. So, despite, let's say I'm angry this day for some whatever reason. I don't know what it would be. Maybe something bad happened for me at work in the morning and just leave a bitter taste in my mouth. I have no right to let those emotions out on someone else. Why should I be allowed to make their day worse? Why am I allowed to assume that I have it worse than them? And also that goes back to this idea of comparing yourself to others. You don't know what someone had to go through to get that missing tile. You don't know how they're suffering. Maybe they have their own missing tile, you know? But once you start that and you start focusing all your mental fortitude on other people and not on yourself, then that's not going to stop the hole from growing larger. It's not going to fill the hole. It's not going to replace it with something else, and it's not going to help you forget about it. Instead, what it's going to do, it's going to fuel it. It's going to grow larger and larger and larger. Because it's occupying more of your mind. It's just in the sense that you're looking at when other people have it too. So it's just not a good idea in the end, I see, to focus so much on comparing yourself to other people. What I think the proper way is comparing yourself to the person of the day before. And for the reason being, if you're aiming to fill the hole or to make that hole better, you can watch the progress. You can see how you were the day before and see how you're doing with it now. And then as the weeks pass, as the months pass, you can see the grand change. You can see things become what you want them to be. But it's only if you want to put the effort in it. So everything is just a root result of the individual, you know? You can't escape that when it comes to finding your own happiness. And, you know, maybe it shouldn't be that way, but that's how the world is. That's reality. No one can give you that tile. You have to go and figure it out yourself. Not saying we can't support you. Not saying your friends and family can't be there, because they're so important. They're so important, especially having a life partner that you can rely on rely on them. They're your rock and anything like that. It's good to have those people there. But ultimately, it always comes down to you, to ourselves. And, well, sometimes it's the fear that holds us back. And we'll get into that specific idea in the next segment. And we'll be back here, continue on this discussion, see where it leads us. Don't forget, the last segment today is going to be the seven most significant missing tiles. And we'll see you back here soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello and welcome back to the Life and Happiness Podcast, run by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Steven Solorzano, and let's get back into this one. And today we've been focusing on the missing child syndrome, which is basically when something feels missing, and it just detracts you from everything else. It's constantly on your mind. And now we went in discussion of what it is, how it works, and that last segment was where it goes, why it goes wrong, and how badly it can go wrong. And this segment, I want to focus on what are the things which reinforce the missing tile, which keep us from doing something to address the situation, you know? And of course, it depends on the severity, what it is. If it's like, let's say it's something as simple as, well, I can mention in the first one, something minuscule. Like, there's one flaw in my girlfriend, and it's just really stupid. She's just too late. She's 2 minutes late to everything. Is that the reason why is that something that's big enough really for me to throw her out or dump her or anything like that? But then there's also cases where it's more extreme, like, it's career goals, and I'm not there, and I don't understand why I'm there, and I don't understand why I'm not there. Or if it's just a wealth thing, if you just constantly look at the people that have more than you. And there's so many different ways it applies, but the point is, it's the tendency that humans have to focus on what's absent, focus on the negative, and how it occupies our minds. And there are two things which I think there are two main reasons which fuel the missing tile, which make it worse, or at the very least stop us from acting on it. And those two would be fear and expectations. Those are the two largest, and they also interact with one another. And I'll start with the discussion on fear, and I want to show how that one has an effect. So, I began the first segment by talking about how biologically we split things into danger and non-danger. And we don't focus on the good because we've already isolated it as non-danger. And unless we actively try to bring it to the forefront of our mind, we'll just put it into routine, into passive, into just, we're not going to pay attention to that because it conserves resources. So now let's say, I'm going to go illustrate this with, I'll guess another example that I have with a friend. So, he doesn't have great dating experience. It's sad to say. He had one which was kind of amazing for him, and it lasted for a long time. And then now he's in a situation where that fell apart, and not just it was an easy breakup. No. It was one of those horrible ones that you see in movies. It was not pleasant, and he did not do well for a long time afterwards. And it's taken a while to rebuild, but now the way he is, he yearns for it. He misses he knows it's a hole in his life to not have that kind of person there. The person that he loves. More like a person that he loves. He misses having a best friend. But now he's also afraid. Having experienced how much such a thing can hurt has made him hesitant to even try. And, well, it wouldn't be that bad if he didn't yearn for it, but he does yearn for it. So it's like he wants something, but he's afraid to put the effort to do it. And I've noticed as time goes on, that whole inside him doesn't shrink at all. At the very least, it stays the same size. But that's what's going. So either what he can do is find someone, or hey, maybe he'll be lucky and maybe get to be that person that he really does care about so much. Or he has to fill it with something else. Be it maybe a job he could focus on, or maybe a pet that he can take care of and love, or maybe strong bonds with close friends like myself or maybe in someone else. But for him specifically, it's the fear of moving on into that direction, the fear of getting hurt once again, which is holding him back from actually doing something. And it's tough to see, but hopefully in time he gets out of it. Hopefully he learns to take the courage. Or maybe I'll just force him to go out. We'll see. But I hope that's a story illustrated what fear really can do to that kind of thing. The fear of, in this case, it's not the fear of failure. It's the fear of getting hurt. The fear of being vulnerable once more. And not sure whether or not that's worth it, but clearly by the way he feels about it, it is worth it to him. Or it should be worth it to him. Or would be. Would be is the most accurate way to put it. And then, now, other forms of it, I'm just mentioning it, is the fear of failure. The fear of it not working out. The fear of you just basically being inadequate. And that goes into many things for like the career-wise, or maybe being able to heal a family type thing. You're just putting too much of a burden on yourself, and because that fear is basically holding you stuck in that same place, the problem's never going to be resolved, and then the problem just going to keep growing worse. And I'm sure many of you know this, and I'm sure if you have any idea of like psychotherapy or psychology, psychiatrists, what they do, then like you've heard of the idea of repression. Because I agree with them. I don't think problems ever go away. I think you can sweep them under the rug, but they are there, they are present, and they will rear their ugly heads at one point or another. The only question is when. So I don't think listening to that fear is a good long-term strategy. It's a great short-term strategy, because what that means is you don't have to take responsibility. You don't have to look at those issues in the face. You can just save them for later. It saves me pain now. But the thing is, the pain is going to be so much worse later down the line. And who knows, maybe your moral fortitude will have fallen by then as well. Some people make rash decisions when they're in those emotional turmoil type points, you know? And then the next thing is expectations. And this can come from two ways. It's either from yourself or from others. But they both produce the same result. Basically, if the expectations exceed what you believe you can do, they will begin to overwhelm you. It will start to breed that fear. Or at the very least, that's if you're victimizing yourself. But then there's also the nuance where you expect so much of yourself that when it doesn't work out, when you still haven't filled that hole and you still feel the missing tile there glaring at you, you get angry because you felt you were deserving of it. You know you're deserving of it, but you don't have it. And those expectations drive it mad, make it so that it's not that the missing tile is just overwhelming you by just in the background passively. It's that because you're so upset that you deserved this specific thing, it's always on the forefront of your mind. And it's not just there, it's also the largest thing there. It drives you mad when you have such expectations and you're not willing to let go of those expectations and just flow. And this actually goes into a Buddhist idea that the Buddhists see the world as basically there's suffering and unneeded suffering, and the goal is to minimize all unneeded suffering. And a big thing which they would say eliminates unneeded suffering is to let go of expectations. And I've mentioned this idea slightly before, not in this episode, in prior episodes. And the main reason is, if you go into something and you don't set any expectations, you simply tell yourself, I'm going to give it everything that I have. So, if that's the case, whatever the result is, the emotional impact on you will be much lighter. Think about it. Let's say, actually, this is perfect for the date. I keep bringing, asking a girl out example. It's, if you lower the expectations in your mind, if you don't know what to expect and you just want to go and do it, and any result, whatever it is, isn't going to break you. You just went out, you tried, you gave it your all. She says no. Oh, well, there'll be others. But then what if she says yes? Then it's like, oh, it was a surprise. Holy crap. You're like, whoa, it happened. And it's just a good feeling, you know? And you can be grateful for everything because you didn't expect to get it. You didn't know if it would. And maybe it turned out even better than what those expectations would have been. It just makes every kind of scenario like that where you don't know what's going to happen and you just move forward. When it's a negative result, it doesn't break you. When it's a positive result, it's all the more surprising, all the more pleasant. And I think the best result of that is you're no longer afraid. Or maybe you are, but it's a lot smaller than it would have been. The big reason, so this is going to apply more to guys and relationship stuff. The big reason why I say firsts, first loves, first kiss, first date, first hold, whatever the first is, first specifically hold an incredible power over guys, and I've seen it firsthand, and in others and myself, where it's like, the way I would explain the thought is, you think that this is the only person who would ever say yes to you. So if you lose her, you're done. That's it. It's over. You have no more chances. You're screwed. And it's... how would I put it? I've never seen any guy not put those expectations on himself. Not for the first. Afterwards, yeah, you get used to it. You're used to failure. It doesn't matter. But the first time, and it doesn't matter if you're 6 or if you're 60. If you have firsts, they are incredibly painful for those reasons. Because you put so much expectations on it. You're like, oh, this is the first time I've ever felt these feelings. I hope they succeed because I'm never going to feel these things again. Oh, this is the first girl that's kissed me. Oh, no ever girl will ever do that again. I better keep this one. And you'll do anything to keep them. And it's so painful. Oh, my God. And all that happens is because we set these expectations on ourselves, which fuel our fears, fuel our inadequacies, fuel those insecurities, make even more missing tiles pop up, and make everything worse. So, I just don't think it's a good idea. That's simply it. I think it's a good idea to dismiss expectations and just go in giving everything you have. That's the only expectations that you should set, that I will put my highest quality in everything that I do. And then who knows what'll happen. I think it'll take you way further than you would ever think you might be. And, well, I think that's just a nice surprise, ain't it? No, it doesn't seem bad to be in that kind of situation. It might be the exact right thing that you needed at that time. And I don't know if you guys agree with this, but personally, I found that the best things that have happened to me were always the things which were unexpected. But yeah, we'll continue this in the next segment. So we're going to talk about the 7 largest missing tiles, and we'll get back into this, and I'll see you all soon.
the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hello and welcome back everyone to the Life and Happiness podcast run by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Steven Solorzano. Let's get back into this one. We're in the final segment of the day now. The entire theme has been the missing tile syndrome. Basically, it's the things which we're lacking in our own lives, and they may be something large or they may be something insignificant. And the ways that we go about dealing with them and the ways which enhance its negative effects and make it a real big detriment on our own lives. So it could be something like, as the first example was, if you're dating someone special but you notice this one little tiny thing, but it's something tiny, like really insignificant, like she arrives 2 minutes late to everything, and if you focus on that kind of such a small thing, you can lose the entire amazing package just because, well, you focus on the negative, you know? And there are three things which you can do. It's either you address the problem, you actually get what you think you're missing, or number two, you replace it with something else which isn't the exact same tile, but, you know, it's a pretty good fit. Or number three, you just do your best to forget about it and move on. And we talked about the ways it interacts. So this final segment will be the 7 most significant missing tiles, the ones which had the strongest effects on the most people. And let's start out with number 1, which is obvious. It's the money, you know? It's the wealth, all that stuff. Desiring to have more. And because here's the thing about human nature. We're never satisfied. There's always something more that we could want. So when it comes to this one and the next two, it's gotta be completely on, well, if you don't have an appreciation for the material situation that you're in, for your current situation, if you don't give yourself some perspective and gratitude, well, it's gonna drive you crazy. Because think about it. As I showed with the socialist example, there's always someone that has more than you. There is never enough. And even if you do get more than any individual person, there's also always more to be had. And, well, that is a very good fodder to produce more anger and dissatisfaction with your own life. So, and, well, the thing about money is no matter how much you love it, money's always leaving you, you know? So that's the number 1 example. I think that maybe is the most universal of these 7. And I think today has most dramatic effects. And ultimately, because I don't think whatever your material status is, I think you still can live a happy life. It's the constant desire, those expectations for more, which fuel the pain which comes from it. And a similar one is number 2, which is success. And I think this is a little bit more true for guys than it is for girls, but it is a human universal that we all want to be successful. And this one is more like you want to rise to the top of a hierarchy. And there's a big reason why this is different from number 3. Because number 3, it's more like there's a lot of ways to be successful, but they don't bring you any fame, you know? Like, who will care about the guy who's revolutionized the sewage system? No one's going to pay attention to that guy. And he may be successful, he may be taking care of his family, but, you know, it's not everything. Like, who would be drawn to that kind of thing? But I think there's that desire to want to rise to the top, and whatever it may be. And a lot of them are just kind of, they're not noteworthy to the majority of the population. But it's the desire to find excellence. But I think it's good to have that. But it, of course, needs to be tempered, just like money and just like this next one. At some point, you gotta focus on being satisfied with where you're at, so it doesn't drive you insane for the next level up. That way, you can enjoy the things around you, have a sense of peace and calm that goes with it. Or else, well, that urge to keep going higher is just going to keep getting worse and worse. And that lends people to dissatisfaction and unhappiness with their own lives. Now, number 3 is very similar, but probably the least useful of the 3, which is the desire for fame. Think about nowadays, a lot of people want to be YouTube influencers, Instagram influencers. They don't even know what they want to influence on. They just want to be famous. And that's a constant desire for everyone. I think fame comes with this idea that you're just well-liked by people. And you know what? That's kind of true. But being well-liked doesn't mean that you're happy. Being well-liked doesn't mean those are good relationships. And, you know, fame of all of these, I think, is the one where it's the one that you should be aiming for the least. I think you should be aiming to be well-liked by the people directly around you. You shouldn't necessarily want to be well-liked by, like, just some random schmo out there. And also, well, here's one thought. The famous people are rarely significant, and the significant people are rarely famous. Like, think about that. If you go through history, there are so many names in there which we are recorded, but no one knows them anymore. Let's see. Who of you there knows who George Washington Carver is? He's the guy who essentially revolutionized a lot of plantations out in the South. He's a black guy, and he also was a scientist. He was an entrepreneur. He made so many different products out of peanuts and the chemicals within it, and he ushered a new era in fruit and many productions of different things that are commonplace nowadays. We don't know who he is, but right now we know who Cardi B is. We know who's another one. I actually don't know people. I don't pay attention to famous artists. So this is one where I'm not the best one to kind of explain, but like, well, we know who Chris Evans is. We know Robert Downey Jr. We know who else? I guess Ariana Grande comes to mind, but I don't know if she's still relevant. But my point is, you know, some people, they get famous for a specific thing, or maybe for viral notoriety, but it doesn't really impact anything. And also, well, it almost feels kind of shallow. Because I do know a lot of people, the reason why they desire fame is because that is what gives them their sense of self. That others complimenting them is like, okay, just the reaction of others complimenting them is the thing which gives them that confidence. And, well, the reason why I think that falls short is, you know what? Sometimes when you're doing the right thing, everyone's going to be against you. And you're going to receive so much hatred. And, well, even though you get that hatred, I think you need to find the strength to keep on going. So if you build yourself desiring fame, it's not going to work out well in those situations. And along with the fame is, number 3, desiring looks. And, well, there's a nuance here where it's like, you know what? You can do better. You can dress better. You can act better. You can talk better. There are things you can do to improve your appearance. But then ultimately, there's also the thing that's like, well, that's just how you are. And you know what? Some people got lucky. Some people didn't. That's a sad reality of the world. So, and many people just sell themselves short because of it. Like, I think this is a good example of, knowing some girls from back before where they would compare themselves to the popular girls and see how attractive they were, which could be true or could be not true, and in some senses it is subjective, and because they saw that person as way more. This is like the same thing I brought up earlier, where they didn't see the looks in themselves, and well, they saw those other people that had all the looks and got that attention, and just kind of sold themselves short because of it, and they become unhappy, dissatisfied. When in reality, you know what? Some of these girls are actually really beautiful if they just let themselves see it. And there are also different ways that people are beautiful, and there are other ways. And you know what? Not everyone has the same eyes. And maybe someone else might not find that person attractive, but they'll find you amazing and marvelous. And and you know what? Sometimes you're just kind of in a bad situation where there's nothing more I can do. And a lot of guys in that situation actually. So the best thing in this specific missing tile is to do what you can, but ultimately this is going to be the one that you're going to have to forget, because it was the luck of the draw. You didn't win the biological jackpot, sadly. But actually, this is a big thing for guys. Not nearly every guy isn't a hulking Adonis, so you have to just move on with your life. Give it everything else you have to offer. And you know what? Good things will come to you. You know what? If you're a sweet girl and maybe you don't look you're not a 10, if you're loving and caring, there are actually many guys out there who would give their lives to be there with you. And also for a lot of guys out there, if you maybe look like in the looks department, but you're a provider, you're successful, you give it everything you have to offer, there are many women out there who will also go and be there for you. And this next one, actually kind of relates to it, is love. And it depends what people are looking for, because, I'm sure I actually described this story where the person, his missing tile is he wants someone. He's not willing to put in the effort to do it right now because he's afraid. And, this is more of a general kind of thing for everyone. I think most of us have that missing tile. And you know what? You can address it with friends for now, or you can actually just put yourself out there. Maybe get lucky, find the right person for you. And everyone has their own different scenario with that. But love is definitely a powerful one. And I guess a big reason why I see it as that is I think of, what are you going to do once you're in your 70s? Once you're in your 80s? Your parents are gone. Most likely your parents are gone. Maybe you have some siblings, maybe you don't. Maybe your friends have passed away by then. It's just you. You don't have kids. You don't have grandkids. You don't have a wife. You don't have a husband. And at some point, I don't know, to me that feels lonely. But I do think with this specific missing tile, this one's a almost universal one, and it's something that, you know what, I think you should find a way to fill it in, be it somehow good friends or actual relationship. It's definitely one which you should make an attempt at. And this next one is kids. And this one isn't universal, but there are lots of people that do have the yearning for kids. I've been reading some studies, I've been analyzing women and their needs from 20s to 30s, and there's a big shift where the desire to have children increases in that if they don't have any and starting to get closer to the latter end of their ability to do so. And for some, it's the desire kind of immediately. The big reason why I've gained my desire for it is because someone very special to me, it's kind of her love for children and wanting to have her own one day bled into me. And she taught me why it's something so special to have. But you know what? It's not everyone has it, and not everyone can do it. And if we're going to go talk about the replacing, being able to fill it, the void, or forget about it, adoption is definitely something that we should do. I should do an episode on adoption. That might be an interesting thing. Because you know what? At least in the guy's perspective, you didn't give birth to the kid. All you kind of just see them when they're born. And you can do that for adoption too. You can be there when they were born, and then you just raise them for their lives. It's no different of a relationship of, it's your interaction with him. He's not you, but so what? It's just that relationship with the kid, isn't it? So kids is definitely something that there are a lot of different options to do. It's not as universal as the ones I mentioned above, but I thought it was something that was notable. That was notable enough to be in a top 7. And then the last one is thrill. Adrenaline. That rush of doing something adventurous, doing something novel. Because, I think this one becomes more prevalent as peacetime becomes kind of more common. Or, the ease and calm of life. Think about, what's it called when a guy hits that age? Midlife crisis, that kind of thing. When you just kind of go random thing to seek for adventure. And this one is, I think that, how would I say? I think it should be I think this is one that should be forgotten about, because I think people underrate calm and also don't realize how much adventure there is inside the normal calms of life. And also, because the way I like to live life, I don't like, because the reason why this becomes a tile is because people get set in routines and don't mix things up, and it just becomes rather painful to be stuck in that kind of situation. But and I've seen a lot of time with marriages where it's just the love and the passion which was in it just kind of dies out, especially with the kids, and they don't put in time with each other. Whereas, in my mind, at least, in the way I've kind of done so whenever I do engage in anything, is try to give it my all every single day, make something new, learn something new, and even though maybe I'm not going out climbing mountains, going out for partying all the time, or drinking or whatever, just those little things add that enough flavor of the new in my own life that I don't feel like everything is boring. And I think the most interesting reactions come from, having a space where you can be yourself around people. Actually yourself. Because you know what? When you're partying with people, you're having fun, you're drinking whatever the hell, it's a good time, but it's superficial, It's more like shallow. It doesn't run that deep. It feels great, it's pleasurable, but it's not meaningful. And I'm all about doing things which are meaningful. Things which they create that sense that you're in the right place at the right time. And I think living on that path is what minimizes the need for thrill. And, well, we'll see. But these were the 7 biggest missing tiles that I think affect the most people, most prevalent. Because there are limitless others of other things people can feel like they're missing. But what do you guys think? Put it in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts on all these subjects. I do my best to think these things out. If you want to read specifically where I got this idea from, I recommend the book Happiness is a Serious Problem, A Human Nature Repair Manual. It's a great book. It's short. I think about 200 pages at most. No, that's actually like 130 pages. That's a really short book. So, it's also easy to understand. You guys would love it. Anyways, that's it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Give us a like, subscribe, please share, get the word around. I'd love to hear what you all think. And we'll see you all in the next episode. This is Steven Solorzano, and I'm signing off.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitchers, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.